It is a great pleasure today to share the podium with a great personality, an individual who is renowned world over as being the conscience of the Jewish people. He is referred to as being modern-day wandering Jew. Dr. Elie Wiesel is with us here today, and he is an author of some 25 books. He holds many, many degrees, and he's the chairman of the President's Council on the Holocaust. He's also a professor at the University of Boston and humanitarian law, I guess it is, let's call it. I thank you very, very much for being with us today, Dr. Wiesel. I guess we should start right from the beginning. What is really your aspiration and drive to keep you going? Here was a survivor in the Holocaust who had virtually nothing left to him any longer, and all of a sudden has become a driving force in the Jewish community.
Well, in the beginning there was only one obsession, that was to bear witness, to try to tell a story that cannot be told, to try to warn of things to come, and in order to protect a future, we had to tell of the past.
Why look back in the past? I mean, let's not kid ourselves. We are a people who have pretty bad memories of the past, and generally professionals will tell us that if one wants to have a good, successful future, don't look back, just continue forward. Why to us is it so great and so important to look back?
I think it's inherent in our national psyche, so to speak, in our mental makeup, that we are always looking at the beginning. If the first word of the Torah is Bereshit, it means we have to know there was a Bereshit, there was a beginning. And we have to know that there was a beginning, and that the beginning preceded our own. And therefore, whatever we do, whatever act we commit, whatever sentence we formulate, it must be tied to the beginning. It's either Zecher Yetziat Mitzrayim, to the memory of Exodus, or at Sinai, or at the temple. We are not past-oriented, but beginning-oriented. That does not mean that we are not looking forward to the future. After all, we as Jews have given the world the idea of the Messiah. The Messianic concept is a Jewish gift to humanity. But we are oscillating between the beginning and the end, between the divine beginning and the Messianic end.
But let's not kid ourselves. If we continuously look back to the beginning and have the impression that we are a people who look back, people begin to refer to us as ancient, people begin to look to us as old-fashioned, and as a matter of fact, unfortunately, amongst young people today who were not exposed to Judaism properly, if they take a look at a committed Jew, an Orthodox Jew, a Hasidic Jew, to them all of a sudden they're looking at somebody who is, really ancient versus the modern Jew who's looking forward to the future. Doesn't this really bring a misconception, at least, in life?
First of all, I'm not bothered by that. I would not be at all troubled to be called an ancient Jew. That's not what I'm trying to avoid. I would like others to resemble an ancient Jew. I would like to know that all those masters and their scholars and their teachers and their friends somehow are my friends as well. Strange, because just today I read in the newspapers about the great discovery that archaeologists have made in Guatemala. They discovered a Maya tomb that was 1,500 years old. And they are all excited because they discovered a tomb that dated back 1,500 years ago. Well, we are looking back at 3,500 years ago, and no one is excited. There's nothing wrong in looking back. It all depends for what purpose. If it is for morbid reasons, then it would be bad. But I do not think that what we are doing has anything to do with morbidity. It's quite the opposite. We are trying to learn lessons of life. Being modern, what's the big deal about being modern if one doesn't know what to do with that modernism? And to know, we must remember. One thing clear to me, it's terrible to be without a future, naturally. But there is something worse, and that is to be without a past.
That is very true. That holds a lot of weight in what you're saying. But what troubles me is to understand, here is a young man, you were in your teens, I understand, at the time of the Holocaust. You lost everybody. You're left alone in a big world, never experienced anything similar to this or ever heard of anything similar to this. And yet you hear people today, survivors of the Holocaust, who either lost complete faith in a God, in a Lord. How could God have allowed the 6 million to vanish? And yet here is a man extremely strong in faith. If anything, probably this incident has strengthened your faith. What's the secret behind all this? I mean, you walked away without anything.
Oh, it's not not correct. I was wounded, I was scarred, and I spoke of those wounds and I spoke of those scars. Except I never lost really my faith. That's the miracle. I rebelled against it from within, but not from the outside. Strange, but all those who began rebelling against the divine presence in history, all those who denied that presence, do not come from our ranks. Those Jews who survived speak about it differently. They speak about it with pain and with sadness, and they ask questions, but they don't give answers. The others give answers. In my case, it's true that after the war, not during, but after the war, I had very serious questions. I wanted to know what happened, and how could one explain humanity, and how could one explain the creator of humanity. And it's only normal, it's natural to ask these questions. But during the war, we did not. During the war, one of the most, to me now, incomprehensible things that I have done is that during the war, we discovered in the camp that some Jew had managed to smuggle in a pair of tefillin. And every morning, we would get up, many of us, we would get up in the morning before everybody else and would stand in line and lay tefillin, which means, after all, to lay tefillin there, it wasn't such an important command that one should risk one's life for it. But we did. I laid tefillin in Auschwitz. After the war, when I realized what the world had gone through, that the world actually remained the same, that people had known and didn't do much, that the killers had all the power and the victims none. It's that made me wonder and ask questions. And I continue, and my attitude towards that is that one can be a very good Jew with God. One can also be a very good Jew against God, but not without God.
You said something very, very interesting before. You said that those who questioned and lost faith were those who didn't come from our ranks. Can you tell us a little bit about your background? I understand your background is a Hasidic background. You went to yeshiva. You delved into a lot of study of Talmud and everything, and I guess that's the source of inspiration even today, is being a teacher. Can you tell our listening audience a little bit about that?
Well, I come from a Hasidic background. I studied at Tanya, but I'm a Wiesel Chassid. That means my Rabbi was from Wiesnitz, Ohev Israel. And since I remember myself, it was in that milieu that I see myself always with the nigun, with the study and the fervor, because Hasidism meant fervor. I learned it from my grandfather and my mother. My father was a maskil, but still he came to the Rabbi as well. I studied, that means from the very beginning of my life, I studied. At the age of 3, I began studying Ivre and Chumash. At the age of 5, I began studying Talmud. And I never stopped studying Talmud, not even during the war. Somehow, even there, inside the camps, I managed to find a Rosh Yeshiva, and we studied by heart. After the war, I kept on studying Talmud. That means my problems with Rabbi Sholom, or my problems with why should the Talmud pay for it? So I went on studying. And for the last 18 years, I had a teacher in New York who is a misnagid, but the greatest Talmud teacher that I have ever seen in many generations. He was Rabbi Shaul Lieberman, Zichrono Livracha, who was the author of the Sefer Kipshute and Yerushalmi. And so every week, twice, we would study alone for 3 hours each time, the Bavli and Yerushalmi and so forth. So for me, that is a passion. To study Talmud is a literal joy, and well.
You left the war. You were an honorary citizen, so to speak, of Auschwitz and Buchenwald.
Not an honorary, no.
You managed to slip out from under the hands of those who are trying to turn every Jew, at least, into a smokestack. Where did you go from there?
From Buchenwald we came to Paris, to France, in fact, because we were 400 children, had nowhere to go, and the French government heard about it, de Gaulle, and he brought us to France. that we went to a castle in Normandy. There we separated. We were 100 who remained religious, and we went elsewhere. And the others who grew up not to be, and they went to another camp. And the 100 of us remained another year together, studying, learning. And some of us are still together.
When did you discover your poetic talents, your writing talents? I mean, let's not kid ourselves. 25 books is not something you can just put away with your hand.
Not with one hand, with two hands. I wrote even when I was a child. When I was bar mitzvah, I wrote a commentary on the Bible. And when I went back many, many years later to my hometown, I found some of its pages there. And so I knew I would write. I knew I would write. I didn't know what I would write. Hadn't there been a war, I would have written other things. I would have written probably something of the Talmud or the Bible and so forth. It's not a discovery, it's the compulsion. That means I feel there is something I must say in words and something I must say in written words.
Do you find reaction from the general public? Do you find people responding even to the novels? Because even the novels that you do write have a message in them. It's not just you're writing a story about a rabbi and a son-in-law and so on and so forth. You always have a message that you're trying to bring forth with them. Do you find people responding to them?
Well, I don't like to think that I'm entertaining. I think the age of entertainment, the literature is gone. Today, literature must have a moral dimension. And I'm aware of that, and therefore whatever I write, it's true. It's part of a mosaic that I'm building. And I know exactly where I'm going with every book of mine, every story that I tell. Yes, some non-Jews even understand better than some Jews. Most of the books written about me actually have been written by non-Jews, professors and so forth. But all of them are involved in a way in religious quest, which means secular people who have no interest in religious spirituality would not really read my work. But those who are troubled with their problems of religion or faith or morality, those who are trying to find a new way or an old way, they find that whatever I say may be of interest to them.
Dr. Wiesel, you do a lot of traveling around the globe. You're all over. In the 60s, there was always a reawakening, if you will, as far as religion was concerned, as far as commitment, people trying to find their roots and trying to find themselves. Do you still find that there is a religious resurgence today, people really trying to, and I always keep on kibitzing around over here by calling it rejuvenating, J-E-W? Is it still existing?
Depends. If you speak about what we call Shmirat Mitzvot, then I don't know, because I'm not looking for that, and I always think I'm not God's policeman. What I do is my affair with God. If it's with regard to learning, yes, there is. I'm not traveling that much anymore because I prefer to concentrate on my students and on my work. But still, I speak every year directly at least to 40,000-50,000 students in universities. Let me give you an example. In the 60s in France, most of the left-wing revolutionaries were Jews, but they were Jews who were ashamed of their Jewishness or who at best were hiding it. These very youngsters have suddenly become conscientious Jews. The secretary of the late Jean-Paul Sartre, a boy named Ben Olivi, imagine, is studying the Talmud. And he has a group, the former Maoists, Trotskyites, and the Stalinists suddenly are discovering the Talmud. Why? Because they realize too that all the other idols have failed. They realize that so many ideas have been betrayed. And they come back. Now, do they have teachers? That is the question.
It's interesting that you bring up that point because, that brings us to the fact that in the Soviet Union, where Judaism has virtually been squelched for close to 70 years now, You find that in the last decade or so, there are so many young people just coming out of the woodwork who all of a sudden have an interest in Judaism, who want to study, and the question is whether they have the teachers, you're correct, but still do everything and anything. And I'm not referring to dissidents who are ready to go on hunger strike to survive. I'm talking about people who actually want to know their roots. What is really the secret after 70 years of squelching Judaism and children and their parents and perhaps some of their grandparents not even knowing what means a kosher home or keeping a Shabbat or any of those things, all of a sudden are out of the woodwork, studying the Talmud, doing mitzvot and doing everything? Where do you really find that being the secret to that?
I think it began on a superficial level. It began on a political level. Those youngsters realized one day that no matter what they were doing, they would still be considered Jews, and therefore hated as such, persecuted as such. So they said, what do you mean? Since they want us to be Jews, why wouldn't we be Jews? That's how it began in the beginning. So it was really under the pressure of the enemy. Stalin was an idiot. When he insisted on the word Yevrei, Jew, being written in every identity card, he was an idiot. Because otherwise, I'm afraid, had they allowed the Jews in Russia to assimilate totally, many of them would have. Not all, because there's always a Sherit Haplita. But many of them would have. But he didn't. But it's always the same story. We trust the enemy as well. He will be an instrument in our destiny. And they began asking, what does it mean to be Jewish? And I was there in the very beginning, in '65, when we started organizing the seminars. And what they wanted to learn really was, what is it being Jewish? It's not an accident, after all, that those people then, who didn't know anything about Judaism, who didn't know the first thing or the first mitzvah, but when they wanted to meet, they met in a synagogue. When they wanted to meet, they met at the Archipova Street, or in Leningrad. They met in the shul where a few Lubavitcher, by the way, had done marvelous things, wonders. Or in cemeteries. They would meet in Jewish cemeteries. There they would study. They would study Hebrew, they would study the first dinim, they would study Jewish history, literature. And now, I was there a few years ago again for the third time. All they want, really, from us is not money, not even political help. What they want is books. Send them books. And every book to them is a holiday.
Well, we are the people of the book, I guess, and they're keeping up that tradition. But, you know, you're a thinker, you're a philosopher. Why does the world hate the Jewish people? Why have we been doomed to failure, so to speak, before we were even born? But in essence, here's a people who are in essence a minority, really don't try to interfere in the affairs of the world, so to speak, to gain so many enemies, and yet I don't think there's one part of the world where there are no enemies of the Jewish people around. Why?
Maybe they can't figure us out. From the very beginning, when you study our history, you will see that all the enemies had the same arguments and the same argumentation. From King Pharaoh of Egypt to Haman, to Hitler, to Quemada, they all had the same argument, saying, look at these people, so small and so different, and such a sense of solidarity and its own language, its own culture, and so forth. They couldn't figure us out. So they had no imagination, and we had more imagination than they, until the Khurban, until the last tragedy, when the killer had more imagination than we had. But until then, they couldn't figure us out. They said, what do you mean? Why don't you disappear? You know, we give you all the possibilities. Why don't you disappear? You should disappear. If it's life, choose our life. In 2,000 years ago, we had even a choice of becoming a world power. Rome was in decline. Millions of soldiers of the Roman legions were looking for a religion. And if we had made it a little bit easier for them, Rome would have become a Jewish empire. But we didn't. We wanted to be small. So Christianity took over. And now they don't understand. You had a chance of becoming the empire in the world. And yet you wanted to be small and weak and persecuted. Why? They don't understand us. And what you don't understand, you persecute.
Well, it's true that they don't really understand us at all and understand where we're coming from. But in essence, As a people, yes, we've had opportunities, but it's not the question where somebody hates you. It's not a question where somebody doesn't want to speak to you. It's a question where people are taking active moves to see to eradicate, to wipe them out, to get rid of them, to see that there's nothing, no remnants left of them whatsoever. And like again, what better proof do we need? Your own experience in the Holocaust itself. I mean, should the world have allowed it, and should he have not been stopped in his bootstraps, so to speak, what would have been left of the Jewish people? And it's interesting that you point that, because even in the Megillat Esther, in the story of Purim, when Haman came to the king to tell him about the Jewish people, he didn't refer to them by name. He didn't refer to them by a occupation. He referred to them, as you said yourself. There is a people apart in your nation whose language is different, who carry themselves different, who have their own customs and tradition, and it doesn't pay for the king to hold on to them. So, you know, without referring even to a name, I guess everybody knew who we're speaking of. But again, you know, going back to them, the activity of seeing that the Jews get wiped out or exterminated is an active one. And I think that the people who fool themselves and say that in 1984 or in our modern day and age that another Holocaust cannot revamp and reopen tomorrow, I think it's really foolish, because there are enough people outside who would just wait for that opportunity and wait for something like that to happen and actively participate.
I disagree. I disagree that that kind of tragedy could ever occur again. Why? Because it once occurred already. It cannot happen. I think Rav Kook, the great Rav Kook in Israel, when during the war, Rommel was standing near the gates of Israel. Was it Rav Herzog? The British wanted to evacuate him to America, and he said, "I am not going." And they said, "But Rabbi, they are here. Tomorrow they may come in." "I am not going." And they said, "Why not?" He said, "Because we have seen in our literature all the time that there is mention of 2 destructions of a temple, but not of third one. The third time it cannot happen. I don't think it can happen again. I think as long as we remember, we are shielded by that memory. I think of worse things in a way, forgive me for the word, meaning the whole world may go up in flames. That is my worry. That if there are a few madmen, and there are more than a few, they can provoke a world catastrophe, and again in flames, again in fire, and the whole planet would be reduced to ashes. For the first time, the danger is a planetary one, and that we have learned, that it's impossible to try to kill a people without leaving what we call a pagam on the Yetzirah, a blemish on the world. And that blemish is there, and that blemish made the whole world vulnerable. So if these madmen would have once more a possibility of doing anything, they would do it not only against our people, they would do it against the whole world.
You very eloquently put in the symposium that was on the day after the notorious film, you very eloquently put a statement to the world at large with so many millions of viewers that you finally have seen a time when the entire world has become Jewish. I really loved that statement. Can you tell what you really meant with that? I mean, after all, we don't see converts.
We don't want to see converts. We don't want it. Kashim Gerim leIsrael, says the Talmud. We don't want that. I think existentially we became Jewish. For 2,000 years we lived in constant uncertainty. Now the whole world lives in constant uncertainty. For 2,000 years we Jews lived on the threshold of the unknown. Now the whole world lives on the threshold of the unknown. So for the whole world now, the same dangers, the same threats, the same possibilities of danger are here. And the impotence. For 2,000 years there wasn't much we could have done. Now we have that feeling of impotence, that one day an idiot like Khomeini, a fanatic like Khomeini or Gaddafi, would get hold of weapons and he would press the button without any hesitation, and there is nothing that we can do about it. So that's what I meant, that for the first time the whole world feels the taste of being Jewish. But at the same time it also means that we have an answer after all. We have learned how to survive in certain conditions, and we have learned how to survive and maintain alive a certain image, a certain message, a certain word.
You did point out that as long as the world is going to remember what has taken place, they will not redo it again in terms of against the Jewish people per se. what, as a professional, I mean, you do deal with people on a humanitarian basis, what do you have to do to teach the world to remember? What is the avenue of remembering, so to speak? And I speak now really even for Jewish children, really, because somebody who hasn't lived through the Holocaust itself, somebody who perhaps is a product of the United States for several generations who the Holocaust hasn't even touched, they really don't know the horror of what took place over there. What do we do to show or to remember, to teach this child that, hey, this happened and it touched you? Remember it.
Well, what really happened they won't know. Nobody will ever know. Only those who were there know, and those who were not there will never know. All we can do is bring that person closer to the gates and say, look. And that person may look and see darkness, from time to time may flame. What we can do is teach. I don't believe in spectacular television shows on that. I don't believe in fiction on that. I think only sober, austere, sincere methods of teaching could be applied. There are so many chronicles that some of the victims have left, so many prayers written, so many questions asked, and so many answers given. The halachic, the responsa literature now is getting developed. I would take for children, for instance, age 10, 11, certain books, and then they would discover, and they would continue. There are thousands of volumes now that are to be obtained, easily obtainable, and taught and read.
Do you really think that the President's Commission on the Holocaust or a memorial set up in Washington or wherever it may be will keep the world awake to remember this?
It would help. It would help because we will have not only a monument. I don't believe in monuments. We Jews don't believe in monuments. But as a center of education, surely it will be very important to bring people together from all the areas of all the disciplines of society, and show the psychologists and the philosophers, the historians and the theologians and the children and the elder people, and from Nebraska and Los Angeles, that look, something happened in history, something that shook up history. I think that is something worthwhile.
Do you find that the government per se is awakened to it and really responding properly to all this?
Absolutely. It's a bipartisan issue. It began with Carter, ratified by Congress and by Reagan, and really the entire Congress, both sides, are behind that project. They realized that in matters of morality, in matters of ethical endeavors, this is a #1 priority.
Dr. Wiesel, we're running short in time, but in the less than a minute that we have left, can you really give the world a message? What are you trying to tell everybody as far as the Holocaust is concerned?
Message, I don't even think it has such a message, because in itself it is a message and an anti-message message. That what happened was the result not only of the killers, but also of the indifferent people who stood by. And that we learn in our law, thou shalt not stand idly by.
Dr. Wiesel, I thank you very, very much for giving of your very, very busy schedule to be with us, to share with our viewing audience about all this. We thank you all very much for being with us today, and we re-invite you next week again for another interesting and educational program. Thank you.